My name is Cameron Packard, and today I'll be talking about the Great Compromise for Professor Kurt Troutman's Intro to American Government course. The Great Compromise, otherwise known as the Connecticut Plan, is the sole foundation of the U.S. government and our Constitution. It is made up of the Virginia Plan and the New Jersey Plan. When both of these plans were presented to our Founding Fathers at the Constitutional Convention in 1787, there was quite a split when deciding on which plan was best. Essentially, the Virginia Plan was set up to favor the larger states, while the New Jersey Plan was in favor of our smaller states. After a lot of careful consideration, the Founding Fathers decided to take parts from both the Virginia and New Jersey Plan in order to form the Great Compromise. Created over 230 years ago, the Great Compromise still holds true today with how we run our nation. Before we dive into the details of the Great Compromise, let us look at why a change in our government was necessary in the first place. As a recently independent country, the United States needed to create some form of government. And in November of 1777, the 13 counties came together and decided to write the Articles of Confederation. The Articles had many problems, and it was definitely not suitable for running a nation. Essentially, there was little to no federal government, and every state was left to form and run its own government. The Articles also had no type of judicial system, which meant that if states didn't want to abide by federal law, they wouldn't, because with very little federal government, no one would be there to enforce it or give punishment. Finally, passing laws was extremely difficult. In order for a new law to be passed under the Articles of Confederation, a total of 9 of the 13 counties had to agree. In that case, it would only require 5 counties to oppose, and the new law proposition would be shut down. Clearly, this needed much work in order for our newly independent country to run smoothly. Thankfully, our Founding Fathers knew this and worked towards a change. The Virginia Plan was put together by Founding Father and former U.S. President James Madison. Madison was born and raised in Virginia before the United States claimed their independence from Britain. An article from the University of Virginia states, quote, "At age 29, Madison became the youngest member of the Continental Congress, and within a year, the small, soft-spoken, shy young man had emerged as a respected leader of the body." Unquote. Madison was a member of the Continental Congress before, during, and after the Revolutionary War. He was a part of the Congress from 1780 to 1783, and from 1786 to 1788. James Madison was unhappy with the Articles of Confederation, and he pushed tirelessly for a change. A journal article from Paul Finkelman has a quote from historian Leonard W. Levy that reads, "Madison's, quote, accomplishment in the face of opposition and apathy entitles him to be remembered as Father of the Bill of Rights, even more than as Father of the Constitution." Unquote. In 1787, our Founding Fathers met together in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, to discuss the forming of the Constitution. James Madison was the first man to arrive, and while he waited for the others, he began drafting the Virginia Plan. This plan is also widely known as the Large States Plan. Madison's main thoughts behind this plan were to create a bicameral legislature, as well as to make a national government that would be made up of 3 branches: executive, legislative, and judicial. Each of the 3 branches make up our federal government, and they all have their own responsibilities. The executive branch, made up primarily of the president and the vice president, carries out laws. The judicial branch, which consists of our Supreme Court system, evaluates laws, and the legislative branch is responsible for creating laws. The bicameral legislature presented by James Madison calls for our legislative branch to be broken up into 2 separate houses, named the Senate and the House of Representatives. Each state's number of representatives and senators would be based solely on the population of their state. For example, states with a greater population would have more members in Congress than states with a smaller population. A potential problem that was noticed was the checks that were incorporated with the Virginia Plan. Today, we have a wonderful system implemented into our federal government called checks and balances. Essentially, this gives each branch of government certain checks to do on the other two branches, to make sure that no branch will have more power than the others. It's basically like a balancing act. However, Madison's Virginia Plan had just one check, called a Council of Revision. This consists of an executive, which would have been the president, and only a select number of the judiciary members, and they would be in charge of reviewing, passing, and vetoing laws if needed. This Council of Revision system would have worked, but is not very complex, whereas our current system of checks and balances takes much careful consideration and many steps for laws to be passed. Overall, this plan was designed to give the larger states more power in the nation's government. As stated earlier, James Madison is from Virginia, which was one of the most populated states at the time. While many of the largely populated states, such as Virginia, Massachusetts, and Pennsylvania, were in heavy favor for this plan, states who lacked in population thought otherwise. In response, the New Jersey Plan was proposed by William Paterson. Paterson was born in Ireland, and he moved to America in the early colonial days. He was a former New Jersey mayor, and he also spent time serving on the United States Supreme Court as an associate justice. Most importantly, Paterson is one of our founding fathers, and he helped write and sign the Constitution. Paterson knew that if the Virginia Plan was put into effect, small states such as his own would receive a significant loss in power within the federal government. So, in Paterson's New Jersey Plan, he proposed the idea of having a unicameral legislature. This means that the legislative branch is made up of just one house. This would give each state equal weight when it comes to voting, no matter the population size. Lawmaking would likely become more efficient. However, the majority political party would hold tremendous power. This plan essentially was trying to amend the Articles of Confederation, because it was already tailored to favor the smaller states. The New Jersey Plan was proposed as quite the opposite to James Madison's Virginia Plan, meaning it heavily favored the smaller states. Our founding fathers knew that they could not choose one plan over the other, because that would not make a strong national government. Both the Virginia and the New Jersey Plan failed at the Constitutional Convention, so an agreement was going to have to be made. After a lot of careful consideration, former American statesman Roger Sherman and Connecticut diplomat Oliver Ellsworth proposed the Connecticut Compromise, later known as the Great Compromise. Sherman took parts from both the Virginia Plan and the New Jersey Plan to create a compromise that fits well with large and small states alike. He would create an upper house and a lower house within the legislative branch. Starting with the upper house, this is where the Senate would be held. Sherman said that in the Senate, each state would have equal representation. 2 members from each state would be designated to serve in the Senate, no matter the population of the state. This very much appealed to the smaller states, those who were in favor of the New Jersey Plan. Sherman went on to create a lower house, which would be home to the House of Representatives. The number of representatives in the House would be determined by the population of the state, which heavily favored James Madison's Virginia Plan. The Senate would be appointed or voted in by state legislatures, and the House of Representatives would be appointed by the vote of the people. This compromise also incorporated James Madison's idea of creating a 3-branch federal government. Both the large states and the small states were in favor of the Great Compromise because it was a method to appeal to both sides. The Senate is set up to represent the federal government as a whole, while also keeping the states themselves tied in with the federal government. And the House of Representatives is set up to give people of the United States a true voice in what happens in our state and federal government. Creating a constitution for an entire nation is no easy task by any means. Our founding fathers spent countless hours going back and forth, trying to create the framework for this great nation. And the Great Compromise was an excellent idea proposed by Roger Sherman. Both James Madison and William Patterson ruled in heavy favor of their own plans that they spent a lot of time putting together. However, our founding fathers were looking out for us and this nation and knew that the Great Compromise is the best overall plan. Our nation would certainly look much different today if it wasn't for Roger Sherman and his proposed compromise. Although these 55 delegates met over 230 years ago, if we look around today, we can still see the effects of their great work. Here's a list of my sources I used to put this presentation together, many of which are from the United States Senate website. Thank you so much for listening, and have a great day.